Okay, so get this right. The Department of Justice is taking on Visa.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and we're not talking about like, some parking ticket or something. This is serious stuff. The DOJ, they're alleging that Visa has been acting like a total
A
monopolist. Yeah,
monopolist.
when it comes to debit cards,
Yeah.
like those little plastic rectangles that we all use like 100 times a day without even thinking about it.
Right, right. So what's the problem? What have they been doing?
Well, that's what we're going to uncover in this deep dive. But basically, the DOJ is saying that Visa is using their dominant position to, like, control everything.
Control everything, huh?
Think about it.
Yeah.
Every time you swipe your debit card, money moves from your account to the store's account, right?
Yeah.
But that seemingly simple transaction, it relies on this, like, whole hidden network of players.
Like a financial matrix.
Exactly. And Visa's sitting right there in the middle, calling all the shots. They get to decide how much it costs, who gets to play, the whole 9 yards.
So the DOJ thinks they're abusing that power.
That's what they're claiming. And it's not just some small potatoes thing either. We're talking billions and billions of dollars flowing through this system.
Wow, high stakes. So where do we even begin to unpack all of this?
Well, you actually send over some pretty interesting documents, including the actual complaint that the DOJ filed.
Right.
And let me tell you, it is a doozy. It gets pretty deep into the weeds of how debit card transactions actually work, all the different fees involved. It's pretty fascinating, actually. But basically, the DOJ is laying out this case for how Visa is allegedly, like, leveraging their power to maintain this iron grip on the whole debit card world.
And this is all because they're the biggest player in the game.
That's a big part of it. They've got this massive head start on everyone else. It's like trying to compete with Amazon or something.
Right, because the more people use their network.
The more valuable it becomes.
Exactly. It's the whole network effects thing.
And Visa has got that cycle on lockdown. More people use it, more merchants accept it, and around we go. Makes it pretty much impossible for anyone new to break in.
So how does the DOJ plan to prove all of this? They're going to need some pretty strong evidence to take on a company like Visa, right?
Well, they've got receipts.
Mm-hmm.
The complaint goes into all sorts of specific examples of contracts, agreements, even internal emails from Visa execs.
Juicy.
Yeah.
Okay, so walk me through some of the highlights. What kind of shady dealings are we talking about here?
Well, one of the key things that the DOJ keeps bringing up is this thing called, what was it called? Non-contestable transactions. Basically, these are transactions where, for whatever reason, technical limitations or whatever, Visa is the only game in town. No other network can process the transaction.
So they've got you over a barrel.
Exactly. And, according to the DOJ, Visa knows this,
Mm.
and they use it to their advantage.
Yeah.
Meaning they can basically charge whatever fees they want. Because what are you going to do? You need to process those transactions.
So it's like they're holding those transactions hostage. What else did they find?
Well, and there's the whole carrot and stick approach that the DOJ keeps mentioning. Basically, Visa uses a combination of, like, really sweet deals and not so subtle threats to keep everyone in line.
Who are they threatening?
Everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Banks, merchants, even those big tech companies like Apple and Google that are trying to, get into the payments game themselves.
Wait, what do Apple and Google have to do with this?
Well, they've both got their own payment platforms, right? Apple Pay, Google Pay.
Right, right.
So naturally, Visa sees them as a potential threat.
Mm.
And they're not about to let some tech company come in and eat their lunch.
So what are they doing about it?
Well, according to the complaint, they're using their weight to, shall we say, persuade these companies to play nice.
Persuade them how?
With a whole lot of money and a whole lot of pressure. We're talking hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars at stake here.
Wow. This is big. So they're basically buying off the competition.
Or at least making it very, very expensive to compete with them.
And this is all laid out in the complaint. They have specific examples.
Oh yeah, they name names. Like JP Morgan Chase, for example. The complaint claims that Visa offered them this sweetheart deal. Super low fees on debit card transactions. But, and this is a big but, only if they made sure that a certain volume of those transactions went through Visa's network.
So they're essentially guaranteeing themselves a cut of the pie.
Exactly. And remember, we're talking about JP Morgan here, one of the biggest banks in the world. If they're willing to play ball, imagine the pressure that smaller banks and businesses must be under.
It's almost like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. If they don't go along with Visa's demands, they risk losing out on those lucrative partnerships or worse.
Exactly. And it's not just the financial incentives either. The complaint also talks about how Visa allegedly uses the threat of those non-contestable transactions as leverage. Like, hey, remember all those transactions that only we can process? Well, those fees just went up.
It's kind of brilliant if you think about it. Ruthless, but brilliant.
Yeah, well, the DOJ doesn't seem to think it's so brilliant. They're calling it a violation of antitrust law.
Which is exactly what antitrust law is supposed to prevent, right? This kind of anti-competitive behavior that stifles innovation and keeps prices high.
Right. And that's why this whole case is so important, because it's not just about Visa and their debit cards. It's about the future of payments and whether we're going to be stuck with a system where a handful of companies get to call all the shots.
So what's next? What are the potential outcomes here?
Well, that's what we're going to dig into next, because this case could have huge implications for how we all pay for things in the future.
Yeah.
So we've talked about JP Morgan Chase, but they're not the only ones.
Right? Oh, yeah, there are plenty more where that came from.
The complaint also calls out PayPal
Right.
and even Square's Cash App as examples of companies that have felt the pressure from Visa.
Yeah, you can see how those
That
companies
story there.
would make Visa even more nervous than the traditional banks in a way, right? Because they're the tech-savvy ones, they're the agile ones, they're the ones that the younger generation are all using.
Yeah.
So they're a much bigger threat.
It's like they're not just competitors, they're like
Exactly.
potential disruptors to the whole
Disruptors, exactly.
business model.
Because imagine a world where you don't need a Visa debit card at all.
Right.
You just link your bank account directly to PayPal or to Cash App.
Oh,
And it all happens behind the scenes.
interesting.
Visa is cut out completely. They don't get their transaction fee.
So how does this actually play out though? Like in the real world, what are some of the tactics that Visa allegedly used?
Well, they give us a couple of examples in the complaint.
Okay.
With PayPal, they claim that Visa offered them hundreds of millions of dollars
Wow.
in what they call incentives. But basically, it was to make sure that PayPal didn't roll out certain products that would compete with Visa debit cards.
It's like, here's a big pile of money, just, don't rock the boat too much.
Exactly. Play nice in the sandbox.
Yeah.
Don't step on our toes.
Wow.
And then you've got Cash App, which, I mean, everybody uses Cash App these days.
I know people who, that's their primary bank account.
I know.
Which is kind of crazy.
I know, it's amazing.
But it's like they're so good at what they do.
Yeah, and you can see how that would really worry Visa, because it's like, why do I need a bank if I've got Cash App?
Right.
I can do everything through them.
Right.
So again, they don't give us specific details, but they imply that there were similar conversations with Cash App.
Oh, really?
Incentives offered to make sure that they didn't roll out any products that would compete directly with Visa debit.
Interesting. So it's like all about staying one step ahead
Always.
of the curve.
Yeah.
And making sure that nobody else can catch up.
And making sure that you are the essential player, the gatekeeper, the one that everybody has to go through.
The toll booth on the information superhighway.
There you go.
So what happens, though, if, this is obviously,
Yeah.
concerning from an antitrust perspective, but, are we headed towards a world where we don't need these cards?
That's the billion-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
That's what this whole case hinges on, because what the DOJ is saying is that all of these tactics that Visa is using are essentially preventing that future from happening,
Okay.
that they're clinging to their dominant position,
Right.
and they're using these kind of backroom deals and these threats to make sure that nobody can come in and disrupt them.
So it's like they're holding back progress in a way
That's the argument.
to protect their own business interests. Wow. And so what does that mean then for the future of payments? Are we all going to be walking around with microchip thumbs paying for our coffee with a wink or something?
Well, maybe not quite that futuristic, but
Yeah.
but it is all becoming much more digital, right? I
Yeah.
mean, when was the last time you actually used cash for anything?
I know.
It's all contactless payments or Apple Pay or, these apps.
I know, it's true.
So the physical card is almost becoming irrelevant anyway.
Right.
The question is, who controls that digital infrastructure?
Right, because even if I'm not using a physical card, I'm still using the Visa network.
Right, you're using their rails, you're going through their system.
Right. So if we're moving towards a world without physical cards, though, what does that actually look like? What are some of the alternatives?
Right, this is where it gets really interesting, because a lot of people are talking about bank-to-bank payments.
Bank-to-bank.
Direct bank-to-bank payments.
Okay, so
So instead of going through
instead of needing Visa in the middle, it's just
Visa, MasterCard, Discover,
right.
all those guys,
Yeah.
you just send the money straight from your bank account to the store's bank account.
Like a big old wire transfer?
Kind of like a wire transfer, but in real time.
Yeah.
So it happens instantly.
So no more swiping, no more like, oh, shoot, did I bring the right card? Or...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the technology for this already exists. I mean, there are countries
Really?
that are already using this kind of system
Right.
pretty successfully.
So what's the holdup? Like, why isn't this more widespread?
Well, it comes down to adoption,
Adoption.
right? Because for this to work, everybody needs to be on board.
Right.
You need the consumers to be using it. You need the merchants to accept it, and you need the banks to support it.
And that's where companies like Visa, they have that advantage.
Huge advantage.
They've already got everyone right.
They've already built the network. They spent decades building this global network that connects everybody.
Right. So you're saying it's like an uphill battle for any new system to come in,
Exactly.
compete with that.
And that's why this DOJ case is so fascinating, because it could actually tip the scales.
Really?
If the DOJ can rein in some of these alleged anti-competitive practices, it might give these new systems a fighting chance.
So it's like a real turning point, potentially.
It could be a real turning point. I mean, are we going to be stuck with this system where a few powerful companies get to control everything?
Right.
Or are we going to move towards a more open, more decentralized, more innovative?
Right, where the little guy has a chance.
Exactly. And
Got it.
that brings it back to you, the listener.
Oh boy, here we go.
Because every time you swipe that card, every time you tap your phone,
Yeah.
you're making a choice. You're supporting a certain system.
So what are we supposed to do? Like, should I just start paying for everything in cash?
Well, I mean, you could.
Go back to like the barter system?
I'm not saying you have to go that far, but just be aware. Be a conscious consumer. Ask questions.
Don't just swipe blindly.
Don't just swipe blindly.
Exactly.
Think about what's happening behind the scenes. Think about the companies you want to support, the future you want to create.
Wow. It's actually kind of empowering when you put it like that.
It is. It's about taking back control of
Yeah.
your financial life.
All right, I'm fired up. Now I'm ready to go start a payment revolution.
There you go.
Well, on that note, I think I need to go count my pennies and contemplate the future of capitalism.
Sounds like a plan.
This has been the Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us.